She was just mopping floors, never knowing the dragon prince only slept too. Her humming. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. The Imperial starship Celestial Dawn glittered against the void of space. Magnificent vessel that housed the most powerful beings in the known galaxy. Within its crystalline halls walked dragons who had conquered stars, entities so ancient and formidable that entire civilizations bent their knees at the mere mention of their names. And there, in the servants' quarters on the lowest deck, lived Hannah Sullivan, a human woman who mopped floors for a living and hummed songs her grandmother had taught her. Hannah had never intended to work on an alien vessel. 3 years ago, she had been a graduate student studying xenobiology on Earth. When her funding dried up and her student loans became impossible to manage, the Draconian Empire, as the galactic community called them, had been recruiting humans for menial positions aboard their ships. The pay was decent, the work simple, and Hannah had jumped at the opportunity to escape her mounting debts. She had no idea that her presence would change the fate of an entire empire. The dragons themselves were magnificent creatures. In their natural forms, they stretched nearly 20 feet long with scales that shimmered in colors humans had no names for. They could shift into bipedal forms that resembled humanoids with reptilian features, making it easier for them to navigate the ship's corridors. Their empire spanned 12 star systems, and their military might was unmatched. They were conquerors, warriors, beings of pure elemental power who could breathe fire hot enough to melt starship hulls. But they had one weakness, a secret carefully guarded from the rest of the galaxy. Dragons could not sleep, not in the way other species did. Dragons entered a state called the torpor, a half-conscious rest that left them vulnerable and plagued by what they called the fire dreams. In this state, their minds relived every battle, every loss, every moment of rage and violence that defined their existence. The fire dreams were so intense that most dragons only managed a few hours of torpor every several days, leaving them perpetually exhausted and increasingly unstable. As centuries passed, the eldest dragons, those who had lived for thousands of years, often went mad from sleep deprivation. It was accepted as the price of their power, an inevitable decline that every dragon faced. The current dragon emperor himself, Corvus, the eternal flame, had not experienced true rest in over 800 years. His son, Prince Dreven, was following the same path. At only 237 years old, Dreven was considered young for a dragon, barely into adulthood by their standards. He had inherited his father's crimson scales and fierce golden eyes, along with a strategic mind that made him invaluable to the Empire's military operations. But the fire dreams had already begun to plague him, growing worse with each passing year. Hannah first encountered the prince 3 months into her employment. She had been assigned to the royal wing, a promotion of sorts, though it meant working night shifts when the corridors were empty and the dragons were attempting their fitful torpor. Her job was simple: clean the floors, dust the artifacts, and remain invisible. She had been mopping the hallway outside the prince's chambers, humming an old folk song her grandmother used to sing. When the door suddenly opened, Prince Dreven stood there in his bipedal form, looking haggard. His Golden eyes were bloodshot in his. Crimson scales seemed dull. Hannah immediately dropped into a bow, her mop clattering to the floor. She had been trained never to make eye contact with the dragons, especially not royalty. Drevin said nothing for a long moment. Then, in a voice rough from exhaustion, he spoke in perfect English. "What is that sound you are making?" he asked. Hannah kept her eyes on the floor, terrified she had offended him. "I apologize, Your Highness, I was humming." "I will stop immediately." Drevin took a step closer and Hannah could feel the heat radiating from his body. Dragons ran hot, their internal fires never truly extinguished. "The melody," he said. "What is it called?" Hannah swallowed hard. "It is called Scarborough Fair, Your Highness. It is an earth folk song, very old." Silence stretched between them. Hannah's heart pounded so loudly she was certain the prince could hear it. "Sing it," Drevin commanded properly. Hannah's voice shook as she began to sing the words, her grandmother's voice echoing in her memory. The melody was haunting and sweet, a love song about impossible tasks and herbs that held meaning. She sang softly, not wanting to disturb the other residents of the royal wing. When she finished, she risked a glance upward. Prince Drevin's eyes were closed and his expression had softened in a way she had never seen on any dragon's face. "Again," he said quietly. Hannah sang it 3 more times before the prince finally nodded and retreated back into his chambers without another word. She stood in the hallway, confused and slightly frightened, before gathering her cleaning supplies and hurrying away. The next night the same thing happened, and the night after that it became a strange ritual. Hannah would arrive to clean the royal wing, and Prince Drevin would emerge from his chambers looking exhausted and desperate. She would sing and he would listen with his eyes closed. After a week he began to ask questions. "Tell me about this song," he said one night. "What do these herbs mean?" "Parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme," Hannah explained as best she could, telling him how each herb had symbolic meaning in old earth traditions. Parsley for comfort, sage for strength, rosemary for remembrance, thyme for courage. The prince listened intently, absorbing every detail. "Your world has many such songs?" he asked. "Thousands," Hannah replied. "Every culture on earth has its own music, its own stories told through melody." Drevin opened his eyes and looked at her directly for the first time. Hannah felt the weight of that gaze, the intelligence and pain behind it. "I would hear more," he said simply. So Hannah sang. She sang every folk song she could remember, every lullaby and ballad. She sang Beatles songs and blues numbers, classical arias she had learned in college, and silly children's rhymes her mother had taught her. The prince listened to all of it with the same intense focus. After 2 weeks, something remarkable happened. Hannah arrived for her shift to find Prince Drevin's personal guard waiting for her. The dragon warrior, a massive creature named Thorax, looked down at her with an expression she could not read. "The prince has requested your presence in his chambers," Thorax said in the common galactic language. Hannah's blood ran cold. Being summoned to a dragon's private chambers could mean anything, and none of the possibilities seemed good. She followed Thorax through the ornate doors into a space that took her breath away. The prince's chambers were enormous, decorated with treasures from 100 conquered worlds, crystals that glowed with their own light. weapons that hummed with barely contained energy, tapestries woven from threads that shifted colors as she watched. Prince Dreven sat on a low couch designed for his bipedal form. He looked different somehow. It took Hannah a moment to realize what had changed. His eyes, while still tired, were clearer than she had ever seen them. His scales had regained some of their luster. Sit, he commanded, gesturing to a cushion across from him. Hannah sat, her hands trembling slightly. You will tell no one of what I'm about to say, Dreven began. Do you understand? Yes, Your Highness, Hannah whispered. The prince leaned forward, his golden eyes intense. For the first time in 50 years, I slept last night. True sleep, not the torpor. I experienced no fire dreams. I simply rested peacefully for 6 hours. Hannah blinked in surprise but said nothing. It happened after you sang that song about the house in New Orleans, Dreven continued. I went to my chambers, lay down, and your voice remained in my mind. The melody circled in my thoughts, and before I knew it, I was waking too. The morning bells. Hannah did not know what to say. The idea that her singing could affect a dragon prince seemed absurd. Your Highness, I am honored, but surely it was a coincidence. Dreven shook his head. I am 237 years old. I have not known true sleep since I was 80. This was no coincidence. There is something in your human music, in your voice specifically, that quiets the fire dreams. He stood and began to pace, his movements agitated. I need you to understand what this means. Dragons are dying because we cannot rest. Our greatest warriors lose their minds too. Exhaustion. My father has not slept properly in centuries, and it is slowly destroying him. If your singing can grant us sleep, it could change everything. Hannah felt the weight of his words settle over her. What do you want from me, Your Highness? She asked quietly. Come here each night after your duties are complete, Dreven said. Sing to me until I sleep. In return, I will ensure you are compensated generously. You will want for nothing. Hannah considered this. It seemed simple enough, and the prince did not appear to have sinister intentions. Still, she had to ask, why not simply record my voice? Your Highness, you could play it whenever you wished. Dreven smiled grimly. I tried that last night. I had thorax record you singing in the hallway. The recording does nothing. It must be live, and it must be you. I do not understand why, but the effect only works when you are physically present and singing in the moment. So began the strangest arrangement Hannah had ever been part of. Each night after completing her cleaning duties, she would go to the prince's chambers. She would sit in a comfortable chair he had procured for her, and she would sing, sometimes for 20 minutes, sometimes for over an hour. She sang everything she knew, and when she ran out of songs, started making up new melodies. Prince Dreven would lie on his enormous bed, designed to accommodate his dragon form, and listen. Sometimes he asked questions about Earth, about human culture and history. Hannah found herself telling him stories about her childhood in Seattle, about rain and coffee shops and the smell of the ocean. The prince absorbed it all with genuine interest. What fascinates me, Dreven said one night, is how humans find beauty. Such simple things. You speak of rain as though it is a gift, yet it is merely water falling from the sky. Hannah smiled. I suppose it is about perspective, Your Highness. Rain to you might be a minor inconvenience, but to Us it is life, it makes things grow, it washes the world clean, and the sound of it on a roof is comforting. Comforting, Draven repeated the word, as though testing it. Dragons do not have a word for this concept. We have words for strength, for conquest, for honor, but comfort is foreign to us. That seems sad, Hannah said softly, then immediately worried she had overstepped, but Draven only nodded. Perhaps it is. We are raised to be warriors, to never show weakness. Comfort implies vulnerability, and vulnerability is death in our culture. Hannah thought about this as she sang him to sleep that night with a rendition of What a Wonderful World, the idea that these powerful beings had no concept of comfort, no understanding of rest and peace, struck her as profoundly tragic. As weeks turned into months, Hannah and Prince Draven developed an unlikely friendship. He began to share details of his life with her, stories of battles fought and worlds conquered. He spoke of the pressure of being the emperor's son, of always having to prove himself worthy of the throne. Hannah in turn told him about her failed academic career, her student debt, and her dreams of one day having enough money to go back to school. You are intelligent, Draven observed one night. I can hear it in the way you speak, the questions you ask. Why do humans allow intelligent individuals to be crushed by debt? Hannah laughed bitterly. That is a question many of us ask ourselves, Your Highness. The answer is complicated and involves a lot of systemic problems I do not fully understand. The prince was quiet for a moment. If you could return to your studies, what would you research? He asked. Hannah did not even have to think about it. Interspecies communication and cultural exchange. I want to understand how different species think, how their cultures shape their worldviews. I want to find ways to bridge gaps between civilizations. Draven made a sound that might have been approval, a worthy pursuit, perhaps. When this arrangement has run its course, I will fund your education myself. Hannah stared at him. Your Highness, that is incredibly generous, but I could not possibly accept such a gift. Why not? Draven asked, genuinely curious. Because I have not earned it, Hannah said. You are already paying me well for singing. I could not take more. The prince laughed, a sound like distant thunder. You give me the gift of sleep after decades of torment, and you say you have not earned an education. Humans are strange creatures. After 4 months, Prince Draven looked like a different being. His scales gleamed with health. His eyes were clear and bright, and his demeanor had shifted from barely controlled exhaustion to focused energy. The change had not gone unnoticed. Dragon Emperor himself summoned Hannah to the throne room. She had never been in the presence of Corvus, the eternal flame, before, and the experience was terrifying. The Emperor was massive, even in his bipedal form. His black scales shot through with veins of gold. His eyes were the color of molten metal, and the air around him shimmered with heat. Hannah prostrated herself on the floor, not daring to look up. You are the human who sings to my son, Corvus' voice rumbled like an avalanche. Yes, Your Imperial Majesty, Hannah managed to say. He sleeps now, truly sleeps. In 200 years, I have not seen him so vital. Explain this to me. Hannah swallowed hard. I do not fully understand it myself, Your Imperial Majesty. I simply sing songs from my world, and His Highness finds them soothing enough to rest. Silence filled the throne room. Hannah could feel the weight of the emperor's gaze on her. You will sing. For me, Corvus commanded. Hannah's heart nearly stopped. She slowly raised herself to a kneeling position and began to sing the first thing that came to mind, a lullaby her mother had sung to her. Her voice shook at first, but steadied as she lost herself in the melody. When she finished, the emperor said nothing for a long time. Again, he finally said, Hannah sang 4 more songs before Corvus raised a hand to stop her. You will attend me each afternoon, he decreed. Draven may have you in the evenings. Do not speak of this to anyone. And so Hannah's life became even stranger. She cleaned floors in the morning, sang the emperor to sleep in the afternoon, completed her evening duties, and then sang Prince Draven to sleep at night. It was exhausting, but the compensation was extraordinary. Within weeks she had enough saved to pay off her student loans completely. The changes in the emperor were even more dramatic than those in his son. Corvus had been on the edge of madness, his 800 years of sleeplessness driving him to increasingly erratic decisions. But with rest came clarity. The emperor began making strategic decisions that strengthened the empire rather than simply expanding it through conquest. The royal court noticed. Whispers spread about a secret human in the emperor's service, though no one knew exactly what Hannah did. Some assumed she was a concubine, others thought she might be a spy or an assassin. The truth was so mundane that no one would have believed it. Draven found the situation amusing. They think you are seducing us with your human wiles, he told Hannah one evening, his tone teasing. Hannah rolled her eyes. Yes, because clearly a 26-year-old woman with student debt is the greatest threat to the draconian empire. The prince laughed, another sound. Hannah had grown accustomed to the serious, exhausted warrior she had first met had been replaced by someone with a sense of humor and genuine warmth. You should be proud, Draven said. You have accomplished what no military force could. You have changed the emperor's mind about humans. What do you mean? Hannah asked. My father has always viewed your species as weak, clever perhaps, but physically inferior and strategically insignificant. But you have proven that strength comes in many forms, the ability to grant peace where there was none, to heal through simple melody. That is a power as valuable as any weapon. Hannah felt her cheeks warm at the praise. I'm just singing songs, she said quietly. You are saving lives, Draven corrected. Do you know how many dragons have gone mad and had to be executed for the safety of others? Do you know how many brilliant minds we have lost to the fire dreams? What you do is not simple, Hannah. It is miraculous. The turning point came 6 months into Hannah's service. The emperor summoned both Hannah and Draven to a private meeting in his chambers. Hannah had never been in this part of the ship before, and she was surprised to find it less ornate than expected. Corvus' quarters were practical, almost Spartan, decorated with weapons and battle maps rather than treasures. Sit, both of you, the emperor commanded. Hannah and Draven obeyed. The prince gave her a reassuring look. I have been conducting research, Corvus began, trying to understand why this human's voice affects us when nothing else has worked in all our recorded history. He pulled up a holographic display showing complex brainwave patterns and chemical analyses. The answer is both simple and profound. Human music operates on specific frequency ranges that interact with the electrical patterns in a dragon's brain, but it is not just the frequency, it is the emotional content, the intent behind the sound. Humans pour genuine emotion into their music in a way we dragons do not. Corvus looked directly at Hannah. When you sing, you are not merely producing sound, you are sharing joy, sorrow, comfort, hope. These are emotions dragons have suppressed for millennia in our pursuit of strength. Your music reminds our minds that these feelings exist, and that reminder is what quiets the fire. Dreams. Hannah tried to process this information so any human could do this, she asked. The Emperor shook his head. We tested that hypothesis. I had Thorax bring me 3 other human servants. I had them sing. The effect was minimal. There is something unique about you specifically, though I have not yet determined what. She has perfect pitch. Draven offered and genuine empathy. When Hannah sings, she feels the emotions behind the words. She is not performing, she is sharing. Corvus nodded slowly. Perhaps that is it. Regardless, we have a decision to make. He turned his molten gold eyes on Hannah, and she fought the urge to look away. What I am about to tell you is a state secret. If you reveal it to anyone, you will be executed. Do you understand? Yes, Your Imperial Majesty, Hannah said, her voice steady despite her fear. The Draconian Empire is dying, Corvus said bluntly, not from external threats but from within. Our inability to sleep has caused a steady decline in our population, our stability, and our effectiveness. In another 1,000 years we will collapse entirely. He gestured to the holographic display, showing population projections and mental health statistics that were genuinely alarming. But you have given me an idea, a possibility I never considered before. What if we could synthesize what you do, not recordings, but actual human presence combined with targeted frequency therapy? What if we could train other humans to do what you do and station them throughout our empire to help our people sleep? Hannah's eyes widened. You want to recruit Earth? She said. I want to propose an alliance, Corvus corrected. Earth is a minor world in the galactic community, barely noticed by the major powers. But you possess something we desperately need. In exchange for sending trained singers to our worlds, I would offer Earth protection, technology, and a seat at the Galactic Council. Driven leaned forward, his expression intense. This would change everything for both our species. Earth would gain security and advancement. We would gain the ability to finally rest. Hannah's mind raced. This was so far beyond anything she had imagined. When she took a job mopping floors, would the humans be treated well, she asked, not as slaves or servants, as honored healers? Corvus said firmly. They would be given quarters appropriate to their status, generous compensation, and respect. Any dragon who mistreated a human healer would face severe consequences. He paused, then added something that surprised Hannah. You have taught me that mercy is not weakness, that there are forms of strength I never recognized. If this alliance is to work, it must be built on mutual respect, not domination. Hannah looked at Prince Driven, who nodded encouragingly. What would you need from me? She asked. The Emperor smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth that somehow seemed less threatening than they once had. I need you to return to Earth as my emissary. Explain what you have done here. Help us recruit and train others. and he added with something that might have been fondness. I need you to promise you will return. I have grown accustomed to my afternoon naps. Hannah could not help but laugh at the image of the mighty dragon emperor, looking forward to nap time. I will do it, she said, but I have conditions. Corvus raised an eyebrow ridge. You dare to negotiate with the emperor? You told me to have courage, your imperial majesty. I am simply following your advice. Driven made a choking sound that might have been suppressed laughter. Speak your conditions, Corvus said, sounding more amused than angry. First, Hannah began, any humans who come here must be volunteers. No conscription, no pressure. Second, they must be allowed to return to Earth whenever they wish. Third, Earth must maintain its sovereignty. This is an alliance, not a conquest. And fourth, I want funding for a full xenoanthropology research program at my university. If we are going to make this work, we need to truly understand each other. The emperor considered this for a long moment. Agreed, he finally said, on all counts. You negotiate well for someone who was mopping floors 6 months ago. I had a good teacher, Hannah said, glancing at Driven. He has been telling me about draconian negotiation tactics for months. The prince tried to look innocent. I merely shared some basic principles of diplomacy. Hannah returned to Earth 3 weeks later aboard a small but luxurious ship provided by the emperor. She carried with her a formal proposal for alliance, extensive documentation of her work with the dragons, and enough credits to fund her research for a decade. The first person she contacted was her former advisor at the university, Dr. Marcus Dean, xenobiology professor who had always encouraged her interest in interspecies relations. He nearly fell out of his chair when she explained what had happened. Let me get this straight, Dr. Dean said, adjusting his glasses. You took a cleaning job on an alien ship to pay off student loans, accidentally discovered that your singing puts dragons to sleep, befriended the crown prince, became the emperor's personal sleep therapist, and are now proposing a galactic alliance. Hannah grinned. When you say it like that, it sounds absurd. It is absurd, Dr. Dean exclaimed. It is also the most incredible thing I have ever heard. Do you have proof? Hannah pulled out a data pad and showed him recordings of brain scans, testimony from dragon physicians, and a personal message from Emperor Corvus himself endorsing the alliance. Dr. Dean watched it all with increasing amazement. This could change everything, he whispered. Not just for Earth, but for how we understand interspecies interaction. The idea that human emotion conveyed through music could have tangible neurological effects on another species. It is revolutionary. Hannah nodded. That is why I need your help. We need to set up a research program and a training center. We need to study why this works, refine the techniques, and find other humans who have the right combination of musical ability and empathy. Over the next 6 months, Hannah and Dr. Dean built a program that attracted interest from around the world. Musicians, singers, therapists, and researchers all came together to understand the phenomenon Hannah had stumbled upon. They discovered that perfect pitch helped, but was not essential. What mattered more was emotional intelligence and the ability to genuinely connect with the meaning of the music being performed. They found that certain types of music worked better than others. Lullabies were most effective, followed by folk songs and classical pieces. Modern pop, music with heavy electronic production, did not work at all. Something about the synthetic sounds failed to trigger the same neurological response. 63 humans volunteered for the first wave of deployment to draconian worlds. They were trained not just in music, but in draconian culture, language, and psychology. Hannah personally interviewed each one, making sure they understood what they were getting into. One volunteer, a young man named Tyler Grant, who had been a professional opera singer, asked her a question that many of them were thinking, "Why are you doing this?" Tyler asked, "You already made your fortune. You could have stayed on Earth and lived comfortably." Hannah thought about Prince Driven struggling through another sleepless night, about Emperor Corvus's eyes dimming from centuries of exhaustion, about an entire empire of beings who had forgotten what it meant to feel comfort because they need us. She said simply, "And because I promised I would come back." The day Hannah returned to the celestial dawn, she was greeted like visiting royalty. The entire command staff was there, along with dozens of dragons she had never met, but her eyes found Prince Driven. Immediately, he stood at the front of the crowd in his full dragon form, his crimson scales gleaming with health and vitality. When their eyes met, he shifted to his bipedal form and walked forward. "You came back," he said, and Hannah heard genuine relief in his voice. "I promised I would," she replied. Driven smiled, that expression she had worked so hard to coax out of him months ago. "My father is waiting. He has been insufferable, counting down the days until your return." Hannah laughed and allowed the prince to escort her through the ship. The other volunteers followed, staring in wonder at the magnificent vessel and the powerful beings who called it home. Emperor Corvus was indeed waiting, and the expression on his face when he saw Hannah was almost paternal. "You kept your word," he said. "I should not be surprised. You are perhaps the most reliable being I have ever known." High praise from someone who has lived 800 years, Hannah said with a slight bow. The emperor actually chuckled. "Come, we have much to discuss. And then you will sing." "I have not slept properly in 6 weeks, and I am reminded why I disliked it so intensely." Over the following months, the alliance between Earth and the Draconian Empire flourished. The human singers, as they became known, were distributed across Draconian worlds and ships. The results were immediate and dramatic. Dragons who had been on the edge of madness found peace. Warriors who had been too exhausted to function became sharp and focused again. The effects rippled outward in ways no one had anticipated. Well-rested dragons were calmer, more reasonable. Diplomatic relations with other species improved as the dragons became less aggressive. Scientific advancement accelerated as researchers who could finally think clearly made breakthrough after breakthrough. Earth, meanwhile, benefited enormously from the alliance. Draconian technology helped solve energy crises and disease. Earth's seat at the Galactic Council gave humanity a voice in interstellar politics. Cultural exchange programs brought draconian art and philosophy to Earth, while human music, literature, and cuisine became fashionable on dragon worlds. But for Hannah, the most important changes were personal. She and Prince Driven had become genuine friends, something she never would have thought possible when she first started mopping floors outside his chamber. They spent hours talking about everything From military strategy to the best way to make chocolate chip cookies a human food, the prince had become obsessed with. One evening, about a year after her return, Drevin asked her a question that had clearly been on his mind for a while. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Taking that cleaning job? You could have found another way to pay your debts." Hannah considered this carefully. "A year ago, I would have said my life had gone off track. I had plans, goals, a clear vision of who I was supposed to be. None of that included mopping floors on an alien ship." She smiled at the prince. "But now I realize that sometimes the best things happen when we let go of our plans and simply follow where life leads us. I have seen wonders I never imagined. I have made friends across species barriers. I have changed the course of history in a small but meaningful way. Would I trade that to have followed my original plan? Not for anything." Drevin nodded slowly. I'm grateful you feel that way, because I must confess something to you." Hannah raised an eyebrow. "What is that, Your Highness?" The prince looked almost embarrassed. "That first night when I asked you to sing, I told you it was the first time I had slept in 50 years. Yes, I remember." Hannah said. "That was not entirely accurate," Drevin admitted. "I had managed a few hours of troubled sleep here and there. But when I heard you humming in the hallway, something in your voice called to me. It felt like home, though I had no concept of what home should feel like. I wanted to hear more, and sleep was the excuse I gave myself." Hannah felt her heart do something complicated in her chest. "So you are not just using me as a sleep aid," she said carefully. "I value you as a friend." "Hannah," Drevin said seriously, "perhaps the first real friend I have ever had. Everything else in my life has been about power, duty, and conquest, but with you I can simply be Drevin, not the prince, not the heir, not the warrior, just myself." Hannah reached out and took his hand, something that would have been unthinkable a year ago. Physical contact between species was rare and significant in draconian culture. "You are my friend too," she said, "and I am honored to know all the versions of you." Drevin squeezed her hand gently, careful of his strength. "My father has suggested something," he said. "He believes that you should be given an official title, ambassador of sleep or some such thing. He wants to formalize your position." Hannah wrinkled her nose. "That sounds ridiculous." "I agree," Drevin laughed. "I told him you would hate it, but he is right that your role has become too important to remain unofficial. You are, whether you planned it or not, one of the most influential humans in the galaxy. That is a terrifying thought," Hannah said. "You will handle it well," the prince assured her. "You handle everything well." Official ceremony took place 3 months later. Hannah was named Special Envoy for Interspecies Relations and Cultural Exchange, a title that was more dignified than Ambassador of Sleep, but still felt absurd to her. She stood before the Dragon Council in formal robes, flanked by Emperor Corvus and Prince Drevin, and accepted the position with as much grace as she could manage. Her acceptance speech was short and heartfelt. "I stand before you as someone who started this journey with no plan, no grand ambitions, and no understanding of where a simple job would lead. I have learned that the smallest actions can have the largest consequences." A song hummed in a hallway, a moment of unexpected connection. "These tiny things can change the world." She looked around at the assembled dragons, beings of immense power who had learned to value something as simple as rest. You have given me and my people an incredible gift, not just technology or protection, but respect. You have shown us that strength and gentleness are not opposites, that even the mightiest warriors need moments of peace. In return, we offer you our music, our empathy, and our friendship. The dragons made a sound like distant thunder, their way of showing approval. Hannah saw tears in some of their eyes, something she had learned dragons were capable of despite their fierce reputation. To all the humans who have joined this program, Hannah continued, you are not servants, you are healers, diplomats, and bridges between worlds. Be proud of what you do, every lullaby you sing, every moment of rest you provide is an act of profound importance. She finished her speech to standing applause both from the dragons and from the human delegation that had come to witness the ceremony. Afterwards, there was a reception with food from a dozen different worlds. Hannah found herself surrounded by well-wishers, including several dragons, who thanked her personally for the gift of sleep. It was overwhelming and wonderful and exhausting all at once. She was grateful when Prince Dreven appeared at her elbow and gently extracted her from the crowd. You look like you needed rescuing, he said with a smile. Desperately, Hannah agreed. Is there somewhere we can go that is quiet? Dreven led her to one of the observation decks, a place where they could see the stars spreading out in all directions. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the endless void. Do you ever think about what comes next? Hannah asked. Eventually, the prince nodded. All the time, my father is grooming me to take over the empire eventually, though he seems much less eager to step down now that he can actually sleep. Hannah laughed. I imagine proper rest has given him a new lease on life. Indeed, Dreven agreed, but beyond the throne, beyond duty, I think about what I want for myself, and I find that my desires have changed significantly since meeting you. Hannah turned to look at him. What do you mean? She asked. Dreven met her eyes. I used to want only glory, to be remembered as the greatest warrior, the most successful conqueror, but now I want something simpler. I want to build rather than destroy. I want to create understanding between species. I want to wake up, she paused and smiled, and know that I will spend my day doing something meaningful beyond warfare. Those are good goals, Hannah said softly. They are your goals, Dreven pointed out. You have changed me. Hannah Sullivan made me see possibilities I never considered before. We have changed each other, Hannah corrected. You taught me to be brave, to speak up even when it is frightening. You showed me that prejudgments about people or dragons are almost always wrong. They stood close together, looking out at the stars, and Hannah felt a sense of contentment she had never known before. Her life had not gone according to plan, but it had led her somewhere better than she could have imagined. 5 years after Hannah first hummed a song in a hallway, the galaxy looked very different. The Draconian Empire had transformed from a purely military power into a cultural and scientific leader. Well-rested dragons pursued art, philosophy, and research with the same intensity they had once reserved for conquest. The Empire's relationships with neighboring civilizations improved dramatically, and several long-standing conflicts were resolved through diplomacy rather than warfare. Earth had become a minor but respected power in galactic politics. Human music was studied by xenopsychologists across 100 world cultural exchange programs, brought aliens to Earth and sent humans to the stars in ever-increasing numbers. The program Hannah and Dr. Dean had started now included over 300 trained singers working across the empire. Each one was valued and respected, treated as the healers they truly were. Hannah herself had completed her doctorate in xenoanthropology, writing a dissertation on the neurological and cultural impacts of music on draconian psychology. She split her time between Earth and the celestial dawn, conducting research, training new singers, and yes, still singing for Emperor Corvus and Prince Drevin. Drevin had become his father's chief diplomat, using his newfound appreciation for peace to forge alliances that strengthened the empire in ways military might never could. He and Hannah worked closely together on interspecies initiatives, and their friendship had deepened into something neither of them had words for, but both treasured. On a quiet evening in her 7th year aboard the Celestial Dawn, Hannah was in her quarters now, much larger and more comfortable than the servant's room she had started in. When Prince Drevin came to visit, he looked nervous, which was unusual for him. Hannah, there is something I need to ask you, he began. Hannah sat down the research paper she had been reading. You look serious. Is something wrong? She asked. Drevin shook his head. No, nothing is wrong. In fact, things are better than they have ever been, but that is precisely why I must ask this. He took a deep breath. In draconian culture, when we find someone who completes us, who makes us better than we were alone, we form what is called a heart bond. It is more than friendship, but different from human romance. It is a recognition that two souls have become intertwined. Hannah's heart began to beat faster. Go on, she said softly. I believe we have formed such a bond. Drevin continued. You are part of my life in a way no one else has ever been. When I make decisions, I consider what you would think. When I learn something new, you are the first one I want to tell. The idea of a future without you in it is unbearable. He moved closer, his golden eyes intense. I am asking if you would be willing to formalize this bond, to become my partner in all things, to stand beside me as I work to build a better empire. I know humans have different customs, and I would honor whatever form you wish this partnership to take. Hannah felt tears forming in her eyes. Are you asking me to marry you? She asked. If that is the human term, then yes, Drevin said. Though I understand it may be complicated given our different species. Hannah laughed through her tears. Drevin, you brilliant, wonderful dragon. Yes. 1,000 times yes. The prince pulled her into an embrace, careful as always of his strength. Hannah rested her head against his chest and heard the powerful thud of his heart. I love you, she whispered. I do not know when it happened, but I love you, and I love you, Drevin replied, though I suspect I have loved you since the first night you sang to me. Their wedding, held 6 months later, was an affair that bridged two worlds. It combined draconian bonding rituals with human traditions, creating something entirely new. Representatives from dozens of species attended, bearing witness to a union that symbolized the new era of cooperation and understanding. Hannah wore a dress woven from threads that changed color with her emotions, a gift from the emperor. Drevin wore ceremonial armor polished to a mirror shine. They exchanged vows in both English and the dragon tongue, promising to support each other, challenge each other, and love each other for all their days. When it came time for Henna to fulfill the human tradition of singing at her own wedding, she chose Scarborough Fair, the first song she had ever sung for Drevin. Her voice rang out clear and true, and there was not a dry eye in the audience. The reception lasted 3 days, as was draconian custom. There was food, dancing, and celebration unlike anything Henna had ever experienced. At one point, she found herself dancing with Emperor Corvus, who had become something of a father figure to her. "You have done well, little human," he said as they moved through the traditional steps. "I had good teachers," Henna replied. Corvus smiled. "You had an open heart and a willingness to see beyond differences. That is rarer than you think." He looked over at Drevin, who was attempting to learn a human waltz with Henna's mother. "My son is happier than I have ever seen him. You have given him something I never could, a sense of peace, of home." "He has given me the same," Henna said. "I never expected to find home on an alien ship, but here we are." "Indeed," Corvus said, "here we are." Years continued to pass, and the alliance between Earth and the Draconian Empire became one of the most stable and productive in the known galaxy. The singing program expanded to help other species struggling with sleep disorders and anxiety. Human music became recognized as a therapeutic tool across hundreds of worlds. Henna and Drevin worked together to establish the first interspecies university, a place where beings from across the galaxy could study together, learn from each other, and build friendships that crossed all boundaries. It was named the Sullivan Drevin Institute for Interspecies Understanding, and it became a beacon of hope in a galaxy that had known too much conflict. They never had children. The biological differences between humans and dragons made that impossible, but they mentored hundreds of young beings from both species. They taught by example that differences were not weaknesses, but opportunities for growth. On quiet evenings when the day's work was done and the stars gleamed outside their window, Henna would still sing, sometimes old folk songs, sometimes new compositions created specifically for draconian ears. And Drevin would listen with his eyes closed, a small smile on his face, completely at peace. One such evening, 20 years after Henna had first mopped floors outside the prince's chamber, Drevin asked her a question. "Do you ever think about how different your life would be if you had gotten your research funding and never taken that cleaning job?" he asked. Henna considered this something she had done many times over the years. Sometimes, she admitted, "I imagine I would have finished my degree on time, gotten a teaching position at some small university, and lived a perfectly ordinary life." "Would you have been happy?" Drevin asked. Henna looked at her husband, at the life they had built together, at the changes they had brought to the galaxy. "I might have been content," she said, "but I would have never known this. I would never have discovered that a simple song could change an empire. I would never have fallen in love with a dragon prince. I would never have helped bridge the gap between worlds." She smiled. "So no, I do not wish for that other life. This one, with all its unexpected turns and impossible moments, is exactly where I want to be." Drevin pulled her close. "I am glad the universe brought you to my door that night. Glad you were humming a Folk song, glad for every choice that let us hear, as am I, Hannah whispered. And in the comfortable silence that followed, Hannah began to hum. Not any particular song, just a melody that rose naturally from her heart. Drevin listened, his eyes drifting closed, an expression of perfect peace on his face. In that moment, Hannah understood the true power of what she had discovered. It was not just about frequencies or neurological triggers, it was about connection, about one being offering comfort to another across the vast divide of species and culture. It was about the simple, profound act of caring, enough to sing someone to sleep. Stars wheeled overhead, indifferent and eternal, but here in this small corner of the vast universe, a human woman and a dragon prince had found something precious. They had found each other and, in doing so, had changed the course of history. All because Hannah Sullivan had hummed while she mopped floors, and that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments. Whether positive or negative, your feedback helps us improve. Also, leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one, and I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug and see you in the next story.